On the evening of Friday, May 4th, 2007, an exceedingly powerful tornado would strike the small town of Greensburg, Kansas. This tornado would wreak untold devastation on this tiny community, wiping out 95% of it. She would also be the first tornado in history to ever be rated an EF5, following the newly adopted Enhanced Fujita scale. This particular tornado was, like many, part of a larger outbreak that began that same day, May 4th. In this instance, a low-pressure area had stalled over the high plains, and moisture was coming in from the Gulf of Mexico, moving in behind the warm front. This resulted in the atmosphere becoming highly unstable, reaching convective available potential energy, or CAPE values, that were as high as 4,500 joules per kilogram. And in the meteorological sense, that's horrifying, frankly. That's very, very high. The dry line, the area between the dry and humid air masses, was positioned over the southern portion of the high plains, and that meant that supercells began to form in that area. There was tremendously high wind shear as well, which caused heavy amounts of rotation in the atmosphere, and all this combined basically was the perfect situation for tornadic development. It's exactly what meteorologists look for when it comes to seeing if, is there going to be a tornado? Let's look at the radar. Holy heck, yeah, we're gonna issue a warning now. And indeed, the Storm Prediction Center, SPC, did issue a moderate risk for severe weather across western Kansas as a result of all this. They would also include portions of Oklahoma, Colorado, and Nebraska. Temperatures for that day ranged between the mid to high 80s, and storms did start to show up during the late afternoon hours. By the evening, the supercells had gotten extremely volatile, and one of these would give birth to the Greensburg tornado, as well as roughly 20 other sisters. Yeah, that supercell was working overtime. They were doing a lot, but the Greensburg tornado obviously stood out. At 7 p.m. that day, the National Weather Service office in Dodge City, Kansas, did start to detect a mesocyclone that was associated with that supercell. While they were keeping an eye on it, after just a few minutes, they observed what's known as a bounded weak echo region, BWER, on the radar. A bounded weak echo region is a radar signature within a thunderstorm that's characterized by a local minimum in radar reflectivity at low levels, which then extends upward into and is then surrounded by much higher reflectives. This forms an odd dome shape of rather weak echoes, and that is very much associated with an insanely strong updraft. Radar is incredibly important for even seeing this, because it just can't be seen with the eye at all. The effect is invisible visually, and it's associated with thunderstorms, particularly strong ones, especially if they have more than one, which this supercell wound up having. At least 2 more BWERs would be detected. Then they noticed that it was starting to circulate, and then the circulation was increasing. Really, the National Weather Service was distinctly aware that there was going to be a tornado, to the point that they did issue advanced warnings that this was going to happen. They issued the first up to 39 minutes before the Greensburg tornado even showed up. So in this instance, the NWS was on top of it.
The National Weather Service in Dodge City has issued a tornado warning for Kiowa County in south-central Kansas until 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time. At 9:17 p.m. Central Daylight Time, National Weather Service meteorologists were tracking a confirmed large and extremely dangerous tornado 14 miles south of Greensburg, or 11 miles northwest of Wilmore, moving northeast at 25 miles an hour. Locations impacted include Greensburg and rural residences of eastern Kiowa County. This includes Highway 54 between mile markers 105 and 115. This storm has a history of producing tornadoes causing damage. The safest place to be during a tornado is in a basement. If in a mobile home, evacuate to a substantial structure. Get under a workbench or other piece of sturdy furniture. If no basement is available, seek shelter on the lowest floor of the building in an interior hallway or room such as a closet. Use blankets or pillows to cover your body, and always stay away from windows. This is an extremely dangerous and life-threatening situation. A large tornado has been confirmed. If you are in the path of this destructive tornado, take cover immediately in a basement or other underground shelter, and get under something sturdy.
And it's generally believed that had they not been so on top of it in this case, that a lot more people would have gotten killed. We'll get to the exact death toll later in the video, but as I mentioned, this twister pretty much wiped the town off the map, but the death toll doesn't necessarily reflect that, and this only highlights the importance of what the NWS does. Because they were doing their jobs and getting the advanced warning out there, people had time to get to safety. They were so confident that this was going to be a really bad one, that they even issued the extremely rare tornado emergency 10 to 12 minutes before she showed up. I've gone over it before, but I'll explain it again for those new to the channel. A tornado emergency is associated with something like a tornado watch or a tornado warning, which you're likely more familiar with. A tornado watch is a situation where they think a tornado might show up, but they aren't sure. It's one of those instances where they're like, okay, there is a possibility one will show up, but it's not a guarantee, so make sure you're in a place where you can get to safety easily, but don't necessarily panic or anything, you know. A tornado warning is above that. That's when they're fairly confident that a tornado is going to appear, and that you should seek shelter immediately. A tornado emergency, however, is above even a tornado warning. In that instance, it's basically the National Weather Service going, "Are you people serious? Did you not heed our warning the first time? You think we do this for fun? For kicks? We aren't playing around here. Death incarnate is about to run over your house. Get out of the way now!" It's a really big deal, actually, is really what I'm trying to say, and they don't do it on a whim. It has to be for a very good reason, but again, in this case, this was a very, very good time to do that. There was also live coverage of the storm itself by KSNW, a television station out of Wichita. One survivor of the twister did state that the coverage actually saved his life. Several others would also seek shelter because of that broadcast. Chief Meteorologist Dave Freeman led the coverage and was credited with saving lives, even winning the National Weather Association's Broadcaster of the Year for 2008, which was his second time winning that award, after he also got it in 1992.
Okay, it looks like now a tornado emergency has been issued for Greensburg now. They are tracking that large, extremely dangerous tornado located about 5 miles just to the south of Greensburg. Dave, you were tracking that and showing us just now on there. That is moving north at about 20 miles per hour. So you really need to get in the center of your house or your storm shelters immediately. Again, this is an emergency situation for Greensburg issued by the National Weather Service in Dodge City.
You know, those are words that our friends at the National Weather Service office in Dodge City do not use lightly, and they don't use them very often, and that really points to the gravity of this situation. So again, a tornado emergency now has been declared for Greensburg, and as you look at this, friends, there is the notch where the air is rushing into that storm, and here it wraps around. So even though it's probably really wrapped in very heavy rain and very difficult to see, we can, as meteorologists, still analyze this and see we are still seeing all of the warning signs. Most likely location is now, since that statement was issued, is even closer. I would peg it about right there, and with that northeasterly movement at about 20 miles an hour, the arrival time at Greensburg remains pretty consistent at 9:52, so you've got about 8 minutes to go ahead and finish your tornado precautions. Now, here's what I want you to do. Maybe we have some kids that are home alone tonight with mom and dad enjoying dinner out or something like that. Want to be moving to your tornado shelter. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to turn the volume up on your TV so that you can still hear me. I want you to go ahead and turn the volume up on the computer speakers if you are tracking our storms here live streaming on KSN.com. Leave the volume up so that you can hear us talking with you as we go through these next few minutes. You want to move down to the basement, and you want to go to the center of the basement. That's underneath something sturdy, like a workbench, a work table, or maybe the stairs down to the basement if they're in the center of the room. Center of the basement, lowest level, away from windows. If your house does not have a basement, then you want to go ahead and move to a small room in the center of the house on the lowest level with no windows. So that's, again, a small room center of the house, lowest level, no windows. In most houses, that's going to be a bathroom or a closet, and you should go ahead and get into that room, grab a blanket or a pillow or a mattress and pull it up over top of you. Now is the time, Greensburg, to take your tornado precautions. You need to be in your shelters. Your arrival time is imminent. The storm is knocking on your door. A confirmed large, dangerous tornado from the National Weather Service, a tornado emergency now in effect for Greensburg in Kiowa County. And again, I hope that those of you who are not affected will send a good thought your neighbor's way here in Greensburg over these next couple of minutes as this very dangerous situation unfolds. This is a large, dangerous tornado confirmed on the ground near Greensburg, moving directly toward the town.
Remember, Greensburg was not a large city. It was a very small town with not a lot of people, but still people. And this tornado set her sights directly upon it. Several sister tornadoes were spawned before her, but these were relatively short-tracked, not lasting particularly long or really doing any kind of damage. But eventually, the tornado we're all here for did appear, starting out small as a long rope, but quickly gathering strength and getting much larger. She took on the rather alarming wedge shape, and is believed to have touched down at roughly 9:03 p.m. Oh yes, it was basically nighttime, and that's always cheating, okay? Listen, you can't show up at night, alright? We're trying to sleep, we're getting ready for bed, also, we can't see you, and that's horrifying! She touched down in a relatively rural area. There wasn't a lot out there, and had she stayed there, she probably wouldn't have been a big deal. I mean, she was very powerful, yes, but as long as she stayed in an open field where nobody can get hurt, and maybe she just snaps a few trees, which she did, or debarked them, which she did, or even scouring the ground, which she also did, oh boy, nothing terrible could possibly happen. But that's not where she stayed. First, she began destroying oil tanks that were hanging out there, throwing oil all across pastures as well as a road. She continued to get bigger and bigger as she got near Greensburg, approaching from the south. She reached her maximum width as she crossed Highway 183 of 1.7 miles across. She destroyed several farms, killed an untold number of livestock, before finally running straight into Greensburg. And I mean straight. She followed main streets into the south side of the town. She proceeded to sweep away everything in her path. Multiple homes were simply gone, their shredded remains being tossed across a field south of the town. 3 of those homes were actually very well built and even bolted to their foundations specifically to prevent them from being just ripped away by a tornado. This didn't matter. The Greensburg tornado took them anyway. When she got to the main residential area, she did weaken a little bit, but, I mean, she was still an EF5. Like, on what ratio are we judging weakened? Like, yes, now instead of rendering our houses completely gone, you're still doing that, actually. Like, it was irrelevant, you know? She would run straight through Delmar Day Elementary School, leveling a whole section of the building, and crushing even more homes, which was rated at EF4 intensity, which I always find frustrating. Like, this is an EF5, and you're like, yeah, but this part was EF4. Like, guys, the houses are gone. Can we not split hairs over this? She continued her rampage north, shredding through downtown Greensburg, leveling basically the whole area. The city hall, multiple businesses, more homes, all flattened. And not satisfied with destroying the elementary school, also decided to destroy the high school as well, because why not at that point? She ripped fire hydrants out of the ground, which, thank you, that's terrifying. Don't ever do that again. And knocked over the city's water tower. Much heavier railroad cars even weren't spared, as they were overturned, and some of those had hazardous materials in them. This was almost a horrific chemical disaster. A tank car was there that was killing about, 14,000 gallons of ammonia, and that did start to leak, but not to a degree that was actually harmful, fortunately. The Greensburg Mennonite Church was also destroyed, and trees throughout the town were stripped of all their bark, if they survived at all. One of the few structures that did survive was, surprisingly, a grain elevator. Despite being hit directly by the twister, managed to stay standing. Also, just to be clear, grain elevators, usually not the best places to take shelter from tornadoes. This was a fluke. Don't actually do that. Damage surveys would show that at least 53 homes had slid off their brick foundations, and 194 homes that had technically survived did sustain at least EF0 damage, but those were located along the outer path of the tornado, away from the main event, as it were. So, as you can imagine, of course they didn't take as severe a beating. And it did seem that this tornado only appeared just to destroy Greensburg. As she exited the city limits, she began to weaken quite rapidly. She turned northwest, tracking in a counterclockwise circular direction, and then dissipated in a farm field at roughly 10:05 p.m. In total, she traveled 22.8 miles and lasted a horrifying 1 hour and 2 minutes. In total, she managed to kill 12 people and injure 63. Greensburg was utterly destroyed. 95% of the town had at least taken some damage, if not all of it. 961 homes and businesses were wiped off the map. 216 were technically still standing, but received major damage, and 307 received only minor damage. And as I said before, Greensburg was the first tornado to hit EF5. She also wasn't actually alone. There were at least 5 satellite tornadoes existing around her, and 2 of those were pretty unique, being anticyclonic, which means they rotated clockwise instead of the counterclockwise motion that the vast majority of tornadoes in the northern hemisphere exhibit. In terms of the damage, well, to be honest, they didn't really do much. 4 of the 5 were only EF0, but 1 was an EF1. But as always when it comes to these storms, the damage was done, and spoke for itself. In the aftermath, over 800,000 cubic yards of tornado-related debris had to be removed from what was left of the town. Then President George W. Bush declared a disaster area for Kiowa County, and that included 41 other Kansas counties. The damage was so severe that the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, had to be dispatched, because they had suffered fuel releases and damaged electric transformers, which are also highly hazardous. The EPA had to make sure cleanup went very, very carefully to minimize any health risks to both people and the environment. Well, a lot of people didn't even stay, because how could they? Their homes weren't there anymore. They had nowhere to live, and this wasn't a large area with numerous shelters or nearby friends to take them in. There just wasn't anywhere for people to be, so quite a number left. Before the tornado, the town had roughly 1,574 residents, but by 2010, that had halved to 777 residents. And with a lot of businesses destroyed, as well as people simply not being there anymore, the town's economy was shot. A significant majority, even if they had wanted to stay and rebuild, just didn't have any jobs. There was nowhere to work, so they had to leave. Plus, you have to consider the kids. I mean, families lived in this town, and both schools were destroyed. Classes had to be canceled for the remainder of the calendar year, since, well, where are they going to go to school? Where are they going to sit? The desks have been thrown over the farm fields. I mean, listen, on a temporary basis, FEMA did provide trailers for kids to attend school, but that obviously wasn't a permanent solution, and it wouldn't be until 2010 that a permanent county-wide school was built. As far as the housing situation, FEMA did set up shelters, roughly 200 temporary housing units that were aligned in rows, so people had somewhere relatively comfortable to actually sleep and get out of the weather. Some residents would stay in these for up to 18 months. And while FEMA sometimes gets a lot of flack, they actually handled Greensburg pretty well. These shelters did come with basic living accommodations, and they announced that they would be paying for 100% of the cleanup costs to not burden the town with it. They even hired 21 Greensburg residents who not only wanted to help rebuild their town, but also kinda needed jobs. President George W. Bush visited Greensburg twice following the tornado, and 500 soldiers from the National Guard were deployed to aid with recovery efforts. But actually rebuilding Greensburg was relatively difficult, since, they had to come up with a plan of action and prioritize things, but when they took a good look at it, they were like, okay, what do we need to rebuild? Everything. Excellent. It wasn't easy, and FEMA would activate the Long-Term Community Recovery Program, or LTCR. This program is designed to help recovery efforts in conjunction with the state of Kansas and other federal agencies that offered support. For example, the United States Department of Energy would assist during the rebuilding process and convert Greensburg's main energy source from fossil fuels to wind power, installing a whole bunch of turbines. And honestly, in the Great Plains, the wind turbines are pretty good. I mean, it's flat. Nothing can stop the wind. Also, you could have done that before the tornado leveled the town, right? Like, I don't think we need a massive storm as an excuse to replace the I'm just saying. But most residents weren't really concerned about going green or anything regarding the wind turbines. They were mostly concerned with, hey, guys, my house is gone! So the LTCR did put an emphasis on rebuilding homes, in an effort to try to avoid a declining population, which the town did suffer, but there wasn't much they could do about that. They could only build homes so fast, and it wasn't even just the homes, remember, it was also the economy. FEMA mitigated this as best they could, even incorporating an economic development strategy, or EDS, but without people and businesses, there's only so much they can do for that problem. In fact, a lot of elements of the new Greensburg was environmental in a way. At least one of the homes was a silo home, a tornado-resistant structure, built within the town, and attracted a lot of attention. The reconstruction even spawned eco-tourists, coming from as far away as Europe to see the new Greensburg, which, okay, I mean, if they're gonna put some money into this struggling economy, you know what, I'm all for it, whatever. They also built a new water tower, which was critically important because, well, that's where the water is. Though they did also have the big well, which was one of the historic attractions in Greensburg. It's the world's largest hand-dug well. No, seriously, it is. And it was found that while the visitor center for the well was utterly annihilated, the well itself was fine. Residents were also disturbed to find that their 1,000-pound meteorite, which was also another attraction, was missing after the tornado, but it was discovered in the wreckage of the museum, fortunately, so that was fine too. But as it stands, Greensburg hasn't really recovered. I mean, the town's there, it's still official, and people still go to it, but not a lot of people live in it anymore. As of 2020, the census read 740 residents. It doesn't seem like people are really flocking to the town to actually stay there, and it's mostly because a lot of the businesses just never recovered. I mean, at the time, Greensburg had the only grocery store in the whole county, and that was leveled. The economic situation of this small town really hasn't been able to improve in any significant way, purely because of everything that was lost. True, they rebuilt homes and people were able to live there, and yeah, they're relying on a lot of green energy and carbon neutrality, and that's all well and good, but the people that live there don't really have a lot of money. And part of the problem was that, well, they had done a good job building the new homes, but a lot of those homes wound up being appraised for much higher costs than homes in basically every other surrounding county. Like, why would you pay more to live in a town that has nothing in it? I mean, it's got the well and the meteorite, but I'm talking about businesses, I'm talking about jobs. Greensburg really suffers in this regard, and it's unfortunate that they haven't been able to bounce back to their pre-tornado state. And that way, her legacy lives on. Because while people were able to mourn the dead, and the injured were able to recover, the town itself still bears the scars from the first EF5 tornado. So next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fun farewell.